The heights that great men achieved were not attained in a sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upwards in the night. A very good morning, everyone, respected guests, faculty, and my dear friends. As we begin with the inaugural talk of our leadership series for 2017-18, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome respected Major General Neeraj Bali, Sena Mental Veteran and current CEO, Rodic Consultants Private Limited, and Ms. Sushmita Basu, True Chief Human Resource Officer at Rodic Consultants, to be the first inaugural session of our GMP Leadership Series at XLRI Jamshedpur. Respected Sir and Ma'am, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for accepting our invite and gracing us with your presence. I would now request Amrit from the PlaceCom and Yashika from the GrandCom to please do the honors welcoming our guests with flowers. Ladies and gentlemen, today as we begin with our summit, our guest of honor is someone whose courage and leadership personified. In a career span of almost 40 years and more, from serving the most challenging frontiers of Jammu Kashmir and Assam, to name a few, to commanding the most Herculean anti-terrorist operations and appointments across Srinagar and Indo-China border, Major General Neeraj Bali has been an iconic name in the field of international relations and defense, strategically leading as a brigade commander in the first Indo-US Command Test exercise in Hawaii, to further serving in Lesotho, Southern Africa as security advisor and leader of Indian Army Training Team. Felicitated with Sena Medal, twice with COAS Commendation and Army Commander's Commendation, Major Bali is a Master's and MPhil in Defense Studies with parallel certifications from Asia Pacific Center of Security Studies USA, and a renowned mentor to graduates across the Infantry School, the Defense Services Staff College, and Army Corps College at Mao. An established speaker at prestigious institutes with expertise in domain areas of leadership, intelligence, and Indo-China impact on African continent, Major Bali, superannuated in April 2016 until January 2017, was the CEO of Prarar Rural Education Society, Maharashtra's oldest education society, running 92 schools, colleges, and institutes. He is now the current CEO of Rodic Consultants Private Limited, a Gurgaon-based market leader in engineering and infrastructure consultancy. Please join us to welcome him with a huge round of applause. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Okay, let me start. I would like to say something from the last few days and the last 48 hours. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And the thought that's been on my mind is that I have done a fair amount of speaking over the last few years. Maybe because I don't get to speak much at home. And some of that speaking has been in fairly prestigious places. I've had the honor of speaking in the IIM Ahmedabad a couple of times, certain bodies in the US and so on. But let me just put this on record. Never has my visit or talk been better coordinated, more thoughtfully done, and more proactively done than by the leadership team of XLRI. So thank you very much for that. Is somebody get that? Yes. Okay. Now, I consider this a remarkable opportunity. Sorry if I keep talking up and down. I consider this as a remarkable opportunity. And the reason why I call it a remarkable opportunity is that sitting in front of me is a group of people who are still hungry for answers, who are not yet cynical, who still believe in that outdated word called idealism, who are still looking for ways to make their lives tick, who are still wondering what works and what doesn't work. This is a great place to be in life, because this is the time when you are the most fertile soil in which is open to great ideas, or good ideas. And if somebody can plant those good and great ideas, and those of you who have the discipline to follow them, would certainly benefit. So all that I intend to do today is to offer you some of those good ideas. Yeah, there we are. That's the best idea. So all that I wish to offer you today are 5 good ideas, 5 suggestions, because I can stand here all day and all night. Off. Yeah, there you go. I can stand here all day, all night, stand here for a year, and yet we would not be able to cover every aspect of leadership. So what follows is not from any book. There is not one shred from any theory. What follows is a slice of the collective experience of people who served in the Indian Army and who have then come with a certain amount of wisdom on what leadership is. What did I ask you? When you come here? The VPHR has to go back and report on the quality of my talk. Sitting back. So this is what I intend to do. But before we go there, there's a question. What qualifies an army guy to talk about leadership? It's a no-brainer that leadership exists in every walk of life. You come across great leadership in dhabas, in families, in the corporate sector, in the political realm, in the bureaucratic domain, all the time. So what's this so special about the army? That every now and then when you say leadership, you also say army. And to extend that doubt a little further, does the Indian Army really tick? Or could it be that we have created a romantic notion in our heads which links people with uniforms, with patriotism and so on, and we say Indian Army is a great place to be, and therefore they know about leadership? I'll answer that question because I've thought about it. Sure, from the outside we are clear that the army is one of our most reliable institutions. It will never fail you, no matter what the cost. Whether there is a bridge that falls before Commonwealth Games, whether there is a disaster to be managed, or whether a child falls into borewell, and there are so many children who fall into borewell with such regularity, it looks like a scam to me. You always bank on the Indian Army to come and help you out, and it works. The Army also seems to live in cantonments which look like islands of hygiene and sanitation and good order amidst a sea of chaos in many cities. But these things are management. There is something else at play here. The real test is, what would you do if you are faced with your own extinction, if you are facing death? Would you then follow leaders? Would you be leader enough to persuade a few people to die? Now, you all know that in 1999, before our last war in Pakistan, target. Pakistanis had come and captured our post, vacant post, at great heights, and we were ordered to take them back. And wave after wave of men went in broad daylight, climbing steep inclines in a terrific terrain where you go out of breath after every 5 steps, and into sure death. After the war was over, the Time magazine published a little feature on the 12th of July 1999, and the item that caught my eye was the page from the diary of a Pakistani officer who had been there and who apparently fled. And this is what he said. You don't have to read the busy slide because I have underlined the portions for you. He said, no, the Indians were crazy. They came like ants. You shot at them. You killed 10, you killed 5, then 10, and then 50, and then 100, and then 400. Our fingers got tired at shooting at them. And they just kept coming on, and there was a point when we felt we'll run out of ammunition. Now this is not a luck for Indian Army, as my rest of the talk is not. But what I'm telling you is, there is something else at play, where people coming from the very same society from where all of us come, from the same towns, same middle towns, same villages, same educational backgrounds, are willing to do this without asking for a monetary bonus. So therefore, maybe institutionally the Indian Army has learned something about leadership that it should be passed on. And today, when I'm CEO of a great company, Rodic Consultants, I do see where the bridge can be built. How you can transfer those lessons back into the corporate sector, provided the people who are receiving the lessons are not cynical. They don't say, "Nee, this works in the army. How does it work for me?" Let's see how it works for you. So, these are the 4 things you should ask yourself. What makes people follow at such high cost, when sometimes in offices people are not willing to spend 2 hours extra because it is a sacrifice? Who motivates that? What motivates them? What gives people this great sense of belonging, of sticking to each other, that they will do this collectively? Let me take you on a side. You would recall there was an incident where an army officer tied up some civilian in Kashmir in front of the jeep. There was a howl of protest among the certain sections of society and media, which is of course right. It's their right to protest, it's their right to talk about human values. Though I'm afraid much of this comes from people who have never had any accountable job in face of a mob. What did Chief of the Army Staff do? The Chief of the Army Staff went to Kashmir. A court of inquiry was ordered, as was supposed to be, to find out the truth. But one of the first things he did is he pinned a medal on that guy's chest, that officer's chest. Another howl of protest went up. General Rawat is like Dyer. Rawat is my cosman and no, he is no Dyer. You know what was at play? Because we in the army belong to each other. And we are not about to throw somebody under the bus just because of the protest. We will stick together on a bad day. How do you produce that sense of belonging in the corporate sector? And finally, what is the secret of certain organizations in this country which never fail? Right? Not the only one. Okay. So therefore, the goal of today's presentation is what you've just seen. How can you, as the present batch of students sitting here, can use this? Let me go straight to the first lesson. You can only lead by example. Please perish the thought that you can lead by some vacuous charisma, or by saying sweet things, or by only offering money, and so on and so forth. If you are not prepared to pay the cost of leading by example, then I'm afraid leadership is not for you. You would become managers. You would probably become above average managers, maybe even great managers, who knows. But if you want people to follow you, then remember what your children do. Your children look at you, they believe in you as they're growing up because they hold you in awe, but there comes an age when they start looking at your example instead. And that is what sows the seed of rebellion in so many boys against their dads. Because they see the deeds and the words are different. So they start charting their own course. If your children are not going to follow you without example, how do you expect a team serving in your vertical to do that? Now, I have more to say about this because this is one of the keys to today's talk. So let me start with you with a true and a great story. I must begin with a disclaimer that some of the stories are personal, but that's not because I want to talk about Neeraj Bali, but because these are the stories I know best. The commanding officer mentioned on that slide is me. I was commanding an anti-terrorist battalion in Kupwara sector of J&K. Things were really, really hot. Fidai attacks were about to begin. And on the morning of 4th of June, I was leading a convoy of vehicles over a Kacha road. My vehicle went past. I was about 5 to 10 minutes ahead. And the next vehicle, which was identical to mine, got blown up. The militants had planted huge amount of explosive under the road. This vehicle went up above the eucalyptus trees which were lining the road. How do we know it? Because the third vehicle was watching. It took 2 tumbles in the air, came crashing on the road, instantly killing a major and 2 jawans, and reducing the other 3 people in the vehicle, 1 young captain and 2 jawans, into a state of almost physical paralysis. The vehicle, this is not a true picture by the way, this is a US pictures, but I'm just giving you an idea. The vehicle was a manual heap, and when I got to that point, I couldn't have recognized it as a vehicle. It looked like a piece of metal. And how those guys managed to crawl out of it is a mystery. And the crater which was created was 8 feet. This crater is not 8 feet. It was 8 feet because I stood in it and I saw how deep it was. Now, let me just reel back. So when I heard the blast, I also heard firing. The militants had begun to fire on the remains of that vehicle to make sure that nobody got out alive. And the people inside who were terribly injured and bleeding were crawling out and trying to fire all over the place. And the militants were on a hillside, barely 50 to 100 meters, a very terrifying situation. And we got out of our vehicles and we turned around and we started running back to the site of the operation. We were running because we didn't know how many more mines were there. So we had to abandon our vehicles. Running on my side was a major, and on my left was a Jawan who happened to be my barber. There are barbers in the army. This guy was a guy called Rupal, who was also carrying a weapon, and I was carrying my weapon. The major was carrying his. And as we were running back, we came across this vehicle which was evacuating the 3 mortal remains. So we knew there were 3 deaths. The major told me, he said, "Sir, you are wearing your epaulets, your rags, and you're wearing this red colored thing here. A tab, we call it lipstick on the collar. That's the same one we can use. And the norm is that you don't wear it into battle. The reason you don't wear these flashy things into battle is because then of course the enemy knows who the leader is, and the leader is the first one to be picked up, thus causing certain amount of disarray." So he said, "Sir, you know the norm, you know the rules, you always wear it, please take it off. Don't go into this, we still haven't firing, and somebody will kill you and then there will be further issues." So I said, "Dave, okay. Let me just give you a moment to think." We kept running towards the side, and this officer got a little separated from me, and this barber tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Can I say something?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Sir, what the major said was really very wise. You shouldn't have been wearing this. If something happens to you, then there will be further chaos." And the militant sitting on the hillside would know who the commanding officer is by the rank. I said, all right. He said, but I have one more advice. Don't please take it off today, and don't take it off for the next 3 months. Because I don't want any Jawan in the unit to think that just because 3 people die, the CO gets shaken. That is the power of example that everybody should understand. That even when your life is at risk, you do not stop setting an example. Because people are watching you. People are not listening to you so much as they are watching you. Therefore, standing there in the middle of the bloodshed, I learned this, I relearned this lesson. And I always remember Rupal when I give a talk. That this also tells you how deep the tradition of leadership goes into the army. This is the sort of advice you want to hear from your number 2, your chief operating officer, or your second in command, or hopefully your wife. You want to get this kind of good, intimate advice from people like that, and they're getting it from us all. To honor Rupal, I never took it off for the next 3 years, and I just wore it. I didn't get killed, as you can notice. So, all went well. Now, it's all very well to say, lead by example. I'm just going to offer you 2 tips on what this leading by example really means and what can you do in your lives. The first thing is, you've got to set a certain standard in small things and big things that you want others to follow. You've got to follow it yourself. You've got to walk the talk. You cannot be a Vijay Mallya stepping out of jet planes and jet setting all over the world and talking about cutting costs in Kingfisher. No one's going to cut costs. No one's going to believe you. You've got to set the standards from courtesy going upwards. You've got to be a bit like Obama. Unless you set those high standards for yourself and you follow them, it's not going to work. Of course you've got to develop competence. That's a no-brainer. I'm not going to talk about competence. I take it that you guys, having ended up in XLRI, are the top 3 people. But there are things we lack, whether it is social skills, whether it is EQ, whether it is soft skills. It is your duty and your duty alone to train yourselves and make yourself better than the people you lead. It's not your company's responsibility. It's never going to be. Forget the offsites. You've got to read. You've got to expand your horizons. You've got to learn how to deal with people. And only then can you train yourself. Do you know that training of the army officers is by far the hardest as compared to men? The men are trained for 32 weeks, for 36 weeks. And I have seen the training, it's hard, it's bad. But it's not a fraction of what an army officer goes through. 4 years of near hell. And then every year some more training. So my first recommendation to you is, as you grow up in your career, don't stop growing. Don't stop training yourself over and above what the company is doing for you. Spot your weaknesses, look at what you lack, and train yourself. The second point is, if you're not willing to work harder than the people you command, if you're not willing to put in 12 or 14-hour days, and if your guys are putting in 10 hours, then I'm afraid again, leadership is likely to elude you. You've got to work harder. When you look at the pyramid in the army, it's a very sharp pyramid. There's only one guy on top, chief of the army staff. Then there are a few lieutenant generals, then a few basic generals, and then it expands. But I always used to notice this to everyone, that the workload is the inverse triangle. The guys on top work the hardest. Mr. Modi takes long vacations, whether you like it or not. Right? And puts in on the work. So if you feel that rising in life means less work and more support, then again the leadership part is going to elude you. You've got to work harder. But more importantly, you have to take greater risks. This is where I have a serious quibble with the corporate sector. Everyone plays safe. People somehow think that their jobs depend on everyday incidents. They don't. It's a myth. Try it.
Because your subordinates are looking for you, looking out for you, or they want you to look out for them, not on a good day like this when we are all happy, it's a Sunday, there are no more classes, or you're sitting in a drawing room saying nice things to each other, or hopefully sitting on a bar saying nicer things to each other. No. Your subordinates need you on a bad day. Major Dohai needs the chief of staff on the bad day. And that's the day, if you're going to say, listen, yeah, this I didn't tell you to do. You're my team, but you know, somehow you should have asked me. Oh, this is not what I meant. You lost him. That guy ain't following you. It is a serious myth that if I stand up and take responsibility, somehow I will be sacked. You know what? Your boss is actually going to think well of you. You think they've not gone through all this? The person sitting on top of you, your CEO, is judging you not for the person you are, but the position you might tell him tomorrow. He's looking at you. Is he a leader material? Is Soumya a leader material? I can answer that question. 10 out of 10 she is. Are you a leader material? Are you the type of person who stands by people, or you just discard them and say, start putting rules? Then you're a babu. I can stand here and give you examples all day about how people stand for each other. I gave you about the chief of the army staff. I told you about those things. There was a gentleman in the army, I can take a name now, it's over. There was Major Ramzan. He was accused of molestation or rape. And it happened during the holy month. So, the corps commander, who was the Lieutenant General, called me up. I was dealing with counter-terrorist operations, and said, come to my office in the evening because the Chief Secretary and the DG Police are coming to meet me. So we sat down, and the Chief Secretary gave a long lecture to the corps commander about how upset the Chief Minister of J&K was, how terrible such a thing was, and the army was not there for these things, and that the officer needs to be arrested, first suspended, then arrested, and an example set, and then a court of inquiry ordered, and so on and so forth. The corps commander, who was now the governor of Mizoram, sat there listening to him quietly. And after he finished, he said, you know something? None of this will be done. The officer will not be suspended. He will not be arrested. Because the officer is offering himself for examination. He is offering himself for a DNA examination. He says, this is bullshit. I'm being set up. I'm being framed. He is not hostile. And he said to him the words that ring in my ear till today. He told the DGP and that guy, he said, so this is what we leaders are meant for bad days? To fix small fish? Or how we here that day to stand up for somebody who genuinely needs standing up for? So you can please go back and tell the Honorable Chief Minister, none of this is going to be done. Not under my watch. Instead, what will be done is, two of you will go on Doordarshan, DD Kashir, and read out a statement that I will prepare for you. Where you will say, we're the army and we are both coordinating our inquiry, and if somebody is found guilty, he'll be punished. On the record, the officer, DNA was taken and he was found not guilty. Just saying. But it was the easiest thing to do politically to hang him. So that's what you need. That's what the subordinates are looking from you. Are you going to stand up for them? I'll give you two more examples. You read newspapers. Have you noticed every time you read something about death in J&K, what is the news? One officer and one Jawan died. Mostly. Officer and Jawan's ratio is 1:20, 1:25. Why are so many officers dying? Ever wondered? We did a study of this. We looked at casualties in J&K from every angle. What time of the day they occur, how those guys in bulletproof jackets, how much service, were they well trained, was it day and night, was it a village or jungle, everything. And we came to the conclusion which we actually knew. The tactics are that when you go into a harmful place like the terrace of mining or a jungle, two sharpshooters walk in front. They are called scouts. And then there are a couple of other guys. And then comes the officer. He gets information from up ahead and then he takes the decision. But you know what happens in the valley? the officer insists on going up front. I have seen this with my own eyes, time after time after time, after kicking officers and saying, why are you violating tactics? It's a nahi sir. फालतू में सर इसको क्यों? तो बेटा पीछे रहना, मैं अपना देख के आता हूँ पहले, ये हो क्या रहा है? And the first guy gets shot. Is it good? No. Tactically, no. But is it something that you can genuinely think about? Yes. That's why there are so many casualties. Because people are putting themselves to greater risk than they're meant. Look it up anytime. In 1998, my unit was the subject of a BBC documentary called The Unfinished War. It went on to win awards of Golden Globe variety and so on and so forth. The BBC came to us with the sanction of wanting to film a live operation. But after they came, live operations didn't happen. And BBC doesn't want a poodle faking, stage managed kind of thing that you see on our television most of the time. You see the barish hori hoti hai, you see those guys? They suddenly put on their ponchos and everything, they take a chata and there's water down below. Actually they're sitting on somebody's shoulders. But BBC doesn't do that. They want the real thing because their credibility is important to them. One day, the operation occurred. We got credible information. We were going there, and Phil Reese, the producer, looked at me, and all the BBC guys were dressed in bulletproof jackets, helmets. They are professionals. They have taken part in things in Afghanistan, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and so on and so forth. He looked at me and said, Colonel, why aren't you wearing a bulletproof jacket? So I said, Phil, I don't wear one. He said, but why not? I said, it's got nothing to do with you. He said, all right, we won't record it, but why can't you answer it? I said, all right. I said, see, all men in our army don't yet have bulletproof jackets. So look around. I have 4 officers going into the operation, nobody's wearing a bulletproof jacket. An officer of the army will not protect himself more than the men he commands. Alright. So this is not being practiced by people from some alien society. It's our society, same guys. And why they do it, I'll come to that in the end. So that is how important how powerful is the whole issue of example. But do not mistake leading by example with these things, with style. A lot of people confuse charisma with style. Your ability to spin some words, some jargon which nobody understands, and by play acting. Think of people like Nelson Mandela. You won't find any of this in that. So what is at the heart of all this? At the heart of all this is the authenticity of your personal example. Please think about it. Are you authentically setting an example, or are you play acting? If you do the authentic example setting, then they say sometimes happiness is like the tail of a cat. If the cat chases it, the tail goes away. But if the cat goes on the right path, the tail follows. It's the authenticity of your example that is going to work. So this is my first and the most important takeaway lesson for you. That should you want to go forward and become leaders, not just managers, remember that. We go to the second one. You got to learn the secret of motivating others. The trouble is, we have been made to believe that the only thing that motivates us is money. Nothing could be farther than truth. Is money important? Sure is. Is money important where you are at your juncture of life? Absolutely. Nobody is denying that. But as you go forward, you realize people don't just work for money. They want money. There are people who work because they come from such lovelessness in their own lives that they are seeking another family somewhere. They are seeking another identity. There are people you see, workaholics, who work because they like to work. That's who they are. They want to be known as that. There are people who work because they are craving for attention. There are people who are escaping something else in their lives. And as leaders, if you make the mistake of saying, I'll wait for the end of the year, I'll give them an appraisal, so everything will be all right. You'll wait for it, move to another company. the secrets of motivation. How do you motivate others? Now, this again is a subject of books. Let me just come with 3 things.